Okay, continuing on with the World Data Storage System. In this video, Nelson is going to be stubbing out our database class, implementing a database factory, and the data file system.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so the first thing we need is a database class. And he's going to implement iDatabase. And I'm going to have ReSharper implement all his members. So if you didn't see that, I would an iDatabase alt-inner to bring in World Data Storage Library abstract, alt-inner again to bring up the implement members dialog, and then inner to implement all these members.
Okay.
So we're just going to leave them pretty much as they are at the moment, because we're just stubbing this out. So we just have throw new not implement exception, which is fine. The next thing is this isn't actually going to be a public class. This is going to be an internal class. And what internal means is that the only people who can view or instantiate or work directly with this class are going to be code inside this assembly. No code external to this assembly can actually instantiate a database. Now, iDatabase is public, so we can still use iDatabase in other places, but we just can't instantiate this. And the reason I decided to do it this way is I wanted there to be one single point of entry into this API.
Okay.
And I didn't want the point of entry to be cluttered with constructor arguments or other things, and I wanted the flexibility to be able to expand this point of entry more as the need arises. And I can do that with one simple abstraction. I'm going to write a database factory. The database factory class is going to be the only public class in this assembly, essentially, because it's going to be the one entry point into it. And the implementation of the database factory is pretty simple. All it's going to do is it's going to have a constructor with a string directory, and that's going to be saved out to a private string directory, underscore directory. And then it's going to have a public iDatabase create database method, which is going to return a new database. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And now very easy way to gain access to a new database.
Yep. And for demonstration purposes, I'm going to delete this I and reference the database directly. We'll get a compile error saying inconsistent accessibility. So this just proves that this is not accessible publicly.
Right.
However, if I were to turn this into internal, then that would go away. But yeah, cool. Accessibility is a very important concept in .NET.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step is our database file system, and let's go ahead and implement that because it's fairly straightforward, and it's going to actually be a dependency of our database class. And our database file system is going to be internal. It's going to implement iDatabase file system. And it's going to have a constructor, and the constructor is going to take a directory. And the directory is going to be, okay, so I know a lot of the people who are watching this are new to ReSharper, which is why I'm trying to make an effort to go back through what I did to make that code appear. Because I know in Nelson's Corner we did talk about ReSharper for a little bit, but I don't know if most students
I haven't watched that, but I've been following the MMO only. Yeah, sure. So and that's cool. For we can do that for the first few videos, and then at that point we just assume that they know what you're doing.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing.
Alt insert inner to bring up a new constructor. Type in string database to have a new argument. Alt inner, and then we're going to go down to create and initialize auto property database, which isn't right because it should be directory. And then alt inner, and then we're going to say, why don't you let me, whatever. I know why. Because our directory should be a public getter and a private setter. Index file path should actually just be the same thing. Actually, all of these should really be the same thing except for the file sizes. So I'm going to show a cool little trick. Delete all that. Alt inner, Alt P A inner.
Now, delete all that. Show them again, but this time use the drop downs, just so they know what you. Thank you.
Okay, so I selected all this stuff and I said automatic property finish or automatic property finish.
Good.
Okay, and then these are actually going to defer to methods. So I'm just going to say, well, I'll type those methods in later. Alt insert inner, and then I want directory taken in as an argument. Hit enter, and then I'm going to calculate index file path based off the directory. So I'm going to say index file path equals path, alt enter to bring in system IO, dot, what do you call it, combine, combine directory, and then we're going to call index is going to be database.index, and then our DFP space is going to be path combine directory database.db. And so now we've calculated both of those. We're going to write a little private method get file size, string path. Oh, why did that happen? File info path dot length. So, and I could turn this into a ternary, but for some reason, I don't know why. I don't know why I don't like that syntax in that particular case. I usually do.
Really? It's not that it's that terribly long, so readability doesn't look hard on that at all. But put it however you like it. It's cool.
I feel like this, usually 99.9% of the time, I will fight tooth and nail to use the ternary.
Right.
It's just for some reason, I don't know. I'm weird. Okay, so now our properties are just going to return the calculation. So GFS, and then it's going to be IFP, and then our database file size is going to be get return GFS, and then DFP. And of course, everything decided to explode. So yeah, here's our database file system. It's going to have one more method, and this method isn't going to be exposed to the interface, which is kind of interesting. This is just going to be used internally for our own convenience. That's going to be delete. And all delete's going to do is it's going to delete the directory, which is pretty straightforward. So unfortunately, I can't do directory dot because of the way names work in C#. So I'm going to have to fully qualify this. And the reason is I have a property called directory.
Right.
So I do system IO directory delete directory, and then true for recursive. And then finally, this brings up one thing that I managed to forget about, and that's we want to go ahead and create this directory if it doesn't already exist. So I'm just going to grab that because we're going to need this twice. We're going to say if not system directory exists directory, then directory create directory. Lots of directories. So yeah.
Very cool.
Now, finally, we have to actually pass this into the database because this is going to be the one dependency that the database has on other class. Well, it's going to be the one pseudo publicly facing, if that makes any sense, dependency that the database has. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here, alt insert inner, database file system. I'm actually not going to use, this is actually an interesting point. I'm not going to be using the automatic private getter and setter. And the reason is because if I did this and didn't have this field, what happens? Besides me not having a set word in there. What happens is that when we're inside this database, we can now only access through the iDatabase file system interface, when in reality, we want to be able to access some of these pseudo-public members, like delete. So I'm actually going to not do that. It's just going to be a normal getter with a backing field, and the backing field is going to be database file system, I'm going to just call file system, and then our getter is just going to go ahead and return that guy out, and then we're going to change this to that, and then we're going to make this read-only because ReSharper's complaining.
Cool.
And finally, our database factory will now have to instantiate that dependency by just passing in directory.
Okay. Easy enough. All right, so that's pretty much everything that you wanted to cover in this one here, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much, and we will catch you in the next video.